Dear chess friends, we're back in the FIDE World Cup 2023 that's going on now in Azerbaijan, in Baku, in the round 5 of this amazing chess event. We're following the epic clash of two legends of the sport. We're following now the clash between Magnus Carlsen and Vasyl Ivanchuk. Yesterday, Magnus won his first game with the white pieces, which meant that Vasyl Ivanchuk had to do something. He has to now simply win his game with the white pieces. It's a tough quest, but of course not really a mission impossible, because we have seen Magnus is vulnerable in this tournament. He already lost some games, so if Vasyl plays his best chess, then he could have really good chances. Let's see now what happened. The game finished a couple of minutes ago. Really spectacular game it was, for sure. So with the white pieces, Vasyl Ivanchuk opened with the move e4. We have e5 by Magnus Carlsen, so the game started as a Ruy Lopez, the Spanish game, and with the move a6, Magnus decided to go into the Murphy defense. Standard lines, classical systems, really very often played opening, for sure. Knight to f6, calcing, bishop to e7, which means of course the closed Ruy Lopez we have on the board. Here Vasyl Ivanchuk didn't get challenged with this idea, knight to e4. Probably then the game leads into rook to e1 d4 idea, so it becomes more open. So that's why here it's a more close setup, more positional setup by Magnus Carlsen, which is of course a good choice. I think you don't want to go into tactical battles against a sharp tactician like Vasyl Ivanchuk if you want to of course get a draw. Magnus is of course very satisfied with the potential draw. He's moving then into the next round. After move bishop to e7, rook to e1, b5, hitting the bishop, bishop to b3, calcing, and now a4. This is now the anti-martial system, not allowing this martial setups with the move d5 immediately. So first black has to react here on queen side, and Magnus plays now the standard line with the move rook to b8, 8xb, 8xb, c3. Vasyl prepares now the breakthrough idea with the move d4. Magnus counterplays this idea by developing the bishop. He's trying of course also maybe to pin the knight with the move bishop to g4, making this move d4 a little bit tougher to progress here. But here after move d6, Vasyl Ivanchuk immediately plays now the move d4, which is, I think, an immediate clarification in the center of the board. Magnus reacts here in a good way, of course. E takes d, c takes d, and now d5 creates now a really static position in the center of the board. Whatever happens, I think black has provoked a static position. It's not such a dynamic position anymore. If you take, of course, then knight to d5 will happen. If you pass through like Vasyl Ivanchuk played, the pawn structure is settled. Nothing dramatic can happen now here in the center of the board. Now Magnus Carlsen jumps with the knight on e4, and here after move knight to c3, here again Magnus got challenged with this knight development. Knight to c3, b takes c3 played by Vasyl Ivanchuk, and now bishop to f5. And let's stop and evaluate a little bit now this middle game. First of all, what we have to understand here is that white has a pawn majority on the king side, a 4 versus 3 situation here on the king side. On the other hand, black has here a slightly better position on the queen side, has here a potential attack with this 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side. So when we are searching for opportunities, I think the progress of white should be done somewhere here. F4, F5, H3, G4. So these are the moves that we're searching for. And see, Vasyl Ivanchuk immediately prepares this idea. H3 is trying to break and enter with the move G4. Queen to D7 by Magnus Carlsen. We have bishop to E3, knight to D8. So as promised, black is trying to get use of this 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side. Now after move knight to d2 that Vasyl Ivanchuk played, now maybe even the slightly inaccurate move here by Magnus Carlsen. He hits the flanks immediately here with the move b4. Maybe a little bit rushed here, because Vasyl Ivanchuk had, I think, here great idea, which he unfortunately missed. After move b4, here Vasyl Ivanchuk of course passes through with the move c4. But let's see now better chances here from Magnus. Magnus had the opportunity immediately to break and enter with the move c5. Although this c5 square is covered by the pawn and also by the bishop, after a potential d takes c5, you have this opportunity, knight to e6. Getting your knight back into the game, you hit the pawn on c5, and now after something like c6 that could happen, then we play queen to c6, if of course white wants to give up the pawn immediately. But notice this pawn is hanging on c3. You could maybe hit now the pawn on d5, but now we just simply retreat with the bishop here. You maybe take out this one, but now we take out also now the pawn on c3, and with the supported pass pawn here on the b file, black could have, I think, a decent chance. Instead of this move c6, you don't have to play it. Of course, you can play immediately queen to f3, hitting the bishop and hitting also the pawn, but it doesn't matter. We play simply knight to c5 here. Look at this, the queen is connected now to the bishop. Now you play bishop to d5, but now with knight to d3, you can get here an attack against the rook, and you can get also the pawn back on e5. So this was a very interesting approach that Magnus Carlsen could have played. Really a simplification in an early stage of the game. Really beautiful sort of drawish idea. You get the draw and you're moving up to the next stage. Instead of this move c5, as we said, Magnus played now a risky choice b4, which allowed here Vasyl Ivanchuk to play a beautiful blockade. Look at this. After c4 that Vasyl Ivanchuk played, we have d takes c4, bishop to c4. Notice now that this progress of the b pawn is not so dangerous anymore, because this b3 potential progress on b3 is covered now by 3 pieces, so you can really never push the pawn further. And now I think here the pawn majority attack on the king side, f4 g4 that we have talked about, f5 would be very, very useful. That's exactly what happened. Like after bishop to c4, c6 was played by Magnus Carlsen, so he has to now also paralyze the further progress of the d5 possibility. So d5 would be then very risky for black to handle. But now Vasyl Ivanchuk makes, I think, a slightly inaccurate move. He plays now the move queen to a4, and he changed, I think, a little bit the direction of the game, because as we said, you should have simply proceeded here with your blockade idea on the queen side, knight to b3, not allowing maybe to black to play now the move c5, and if something like rook to e8 happens, then we play simply queen to e2, or maybe somewhere else with the queen, but the main progress remains. We play rook to d1, support the pawn on d4, and then we hit here f4, g4, f5. This was, I think, a much more aggressive approach by Vasyl Ivanchuk that he could have played. Really a nice blocking system you could have here. The knight on b3, controlling the c5 square, and I'm not seeing really good progress here for black on the queen side. I think this was the way to go. But with the move queen to a4, okay, you are maybe preventing temporarily the move c5 by black, but I think Vasyl Ivanchuk got a different plan now. He got simply rushed here with the attack on the queen side. I'm not saying this is bad or something, still white is perfectly fine here, but I think he had really a beautiful chance to maybe somehow coordinate the attack on the king side. So after move queen to a4, rook to b7 by Magnus, he connects now the rook to the queen, knight to f1. You see Vasyl is still trying to do something here, but again, I like more this knight when the knight is controlling the b3 square, when the knight is really not allowing this potential b3 progress. I like this blockade idea here on the queen side. As I said, still nothing wrong. It's not that white is losing the game because he played these maneuvers, but he missed, I think, many times the possibility to launch a king side attack. After move knight to f1, knight to e6 by Magnus Carlsen, we have knight to g3, and now bishop to g6. Very interesting ideas here by Magnus. He almost tricked here Vasyl Ivanchuk, because many of us, I think, would even start to play now the move f4, but this is not working. Look at this, knight to f4 would happen immediately, bishop to f4, and now queen to d4 is in some lines a dangerous threat. We hit the king, and also here the bishop, also the bishop on c4 is hanging, so this is a trap that Magnus Carlsen prepared. So that's why rook to d1, first played by Vasyl Ivanchuk, knight to c7, and you see now, finally, Magnus gets out of this mess. He is coordinating now his pieces, and now there is a beautiful square with your knight. Knight will come on d5, so Magnus, I think, has now defended his position, and suddenly I think he's turning things over in this particular game. Queen to b3. Okay, you're playing a nice battery, but you don't want to be with your queen on the square that's creating a blockade. As we said, maybe the knight was much better here. Then you can play free with the queen. So far, good battery, of course, but Magnus Carlsen is playing immediately knight to d5, fixes now the center, has now a solid position in the center of the board. Rook to a5, Vasyl Ivanchuk continues the pressure, and now an interesting defensive idea here by Magnus, rook to a7. The problem is now, after rook to a7, that Vasyl Ivanchuk probably should have played, and queen to a7, the problem is now bishop to d5 wouldn't be so good actually here for white. Look at this, after c takes d5, queen to d5, the problem is now this pass pawn is rolling on the b file, and not only that it's a pass pawn supported by the rook, it's a pass pawn supported by both of these bishops. You could maybe try something like, I don't know, f4, but now we get this one, bishop to c2, you attack, but now with b3 we are already here, so we are already attacking the queen side. So in my opinion, really interesting choice, defensive choice by Magnus Carlsen. But after rook to a7 and queen to a7, you don't want to, of course, take. You just keep it calm and now play something like, I don't know, play the different idea, maybe knight to e2. Again, you're trying to regroup, getting your knight back into the game, and I think this should be a solid game. When we get the knight on c1 b3, we have to really control just the further progress of the b pawn. But okay, here Vasyl Ivanchuk played rook to a1. He didn't take out the pawn on the rook on a7. We have rook to a8, rook takes a7, rook takes a7, rook takes a7, queen to a7, and now knight to e2. Again, this idea, bishop to c5, c takes d5, queen to d5 is not so good. We have seen the progress of the b pawn is very dangerous, so it's not working. After move knight to e2 that Vasyl Ivanchuk played, Magnus Carlsen played this one, queen to a3, bishop to c1, and after a couple of trades of pieces, still it's a pretty equal position, I think, for sure. But of course, with the risky idea here by black, that black has always this dangerous b pawn. We'll talk about this b pawn further because it will be a theme through the whole endgame now. After move bishop to b3, here Magnus Carlsen developed, of course, the piece further, activated the piece on a better square, attacked also the knight on e2. We have now knight to f4, knight takes f4, bishop to f4. Again, nothing romantic happens, but of course here Magnus pushes now finally the pawn on c5. We have d takes c5, bishop to c5, e6 by Ivanchuk, and now king to f8, getting out of this mess. We have now e takes f7, and now bishop to g6. Here Magnus Carlsen retreats with the bishop and will eventually take out now the pawn on f7. The downside a little bit here for white is here that black has, as I said, this distant pass pawn, which always deflects a little bit the king towards the queen side. And when that happens, then of course black's king is much closer to the action. Black's king is much closer to these pawns. But I still think that this should be a drawish position for both sides if both sides play now, I think, the endgame correctly. Because after king to f1, okay, after a couple of trades of pieces, still this is perfectly fine. But now after move bishop to d4, here's the problem. Now Vasyl Ivanchuk made a huge blunder. He played now the move king to d3. And this is not working because Magnus Carlsen simply grabs now the pawn on f2, and Vasyl Ivanchuk thought that he could get the pawn back. But as I said, the king is getting simply too far away from the action. Even if you pick up now the pawn on b4, then black's king is much closer and will eventually take out both of these pawns. So this is not working. Instead of this move king to d3, what Vasyl Ivanchuk should have played is simply keep your pawn on a light square where it cannot be attacked by the dark square bishop, obviously. Now maybe after something like h5, we can then maybe attack the bishop. You play something like b3, but now look at this. We play b4. You cannot take the bishop, of course, because then this pawn is rolling. But after move g4 here, the position is still a drawish one, I think, because after something like g6, g takes h5, g takes h5, could lead into this types of position where we could have even a wrong bishop position. I've just analyzed maybe one opportunity, maybe after a couple of trades of pieces, and even if you have to maybe give up in some lines your dark square bishop for this pawn, still it's a draw because of this potential wrong bishop position in which black could never really promote with the h pawn and with the dark square bishop. So it's one of the themes that you should really consider in this types of position, that even if you, as I said, you can sacrifice something in order to get a draw. But Vasyl Ivanchuk is of course not satisfied with the drawish position. Let's go back to the critical moment of the endgame. Here he missed really his chances. He played now the move king to d3. Magnus now took simply the pawn. Here he got challenged, but Magnus gets back, and as I said, king to c4 is not working because even if you trade off everything, then black's king is much closer to the action. After bishop to f8, king to d4, king to g6, and king to c4, king to f5 would probably happen. So it's game over here for white. After move king to c4 here in this particular position, Vasyl Ivanchuk resigned. Really wild stuff. How many things can go wrong in these types of positions. We have seen Vasyl Ivanchuk had some chances maybe to launch a pawn majority attack on the king side. maybe this was the way to go, but probably Magnus would have seen, of course, his defensive ideas. Still, Magnus is always finding good defensive resources, but it would have been very, very interesting to see maybe such an attack against Magnus Carlsen on the king side. Really interesting game for sure in the Murphy defense of the Ruy Lopez, but now Vasyl Ivanchuk lost 2 games against Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus Carlsen is moving up to the next round. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Interesting ideas of the Ruy Lopez for sure. If you want to see more games from this beautiful chess event, check out our coverage so far. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.